Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3 Month Vacation. It's the year 2004, and Grandmaster Kasparov is playing this 13-year-old called Magnus Carlsen. Kasparov is no newcomer. He should obliterate Magnus Carlsen, but he doesn't. Because in the middle of the game, Magnus stands up and he walks away from the table, and Kasparov is sitting there intently looking at the chess pieces. And this 13-year-old is wandering around, pretty much unconcerned. And this flusters Kasparov. Suddenly, he's overwhelmed. And instead of completely destroying his opponent, the game ends in a draw. If the things that we do every day end with a draw, that would be quite a good result. But most of us end up losing the game. And the game is always against overwhelm. In this episode, we'll take a look at 3 types of overwhelm and how you can very systematically get rid of them. And it's not by doing anything. It's by understanding where it's coming from. Carlsen did go on to become a world-class chess player. But at that game, at that point in time, Kasparov didn't get beaten by the skill of his opponent. Instead, he was beaten by the concept of overwhelm. Overwhelm is overwhelming, but we'll just tackle 3 of them. And the first one is information overwhelm. The second is, where do you start in business? And the third is time overwhelm. Let's go with the first one, which is information overwhelm. About a year ago, I gave away most of my marketing books. These were the books that I'd bought back in the year 2000. Loads and loads of books. How many books? Well, they filled the entire boot of a car, and we're talking about it being stacked up all the way. The question is, how many of those books did I read? We are going back to the year 2000 now, 20 years, 21 years. And how many of those books did I read from cover to cover? The answer is quite a few, but not all of them. In fact, some of the books didn't even have the wrapping taken off them. Back then, they used to put cellophane on the books, and so you had to open up the cellophane, rip it up, and then start reading the book. And when I gave them away, I wasn't surprised to realize that, well, the cellophane was still covering the book. Now, you might think that, wait, maybe those books weren't so good. They were great books. They were books that we had paid tens of thousands of dollars for, and it helped us start up our business and then grow the business from there. But even as those cellophane-covered books sat in the cupboard, I ended up buying stuff from Kindle and then Audible and then you know it. You know how it goes. You also know how overwhelm works, as in you continue to buy books, you continue to buy courses, and you go, oh, wait, let's stop. Because the way that we tackle books and information is we make notes. We feel this need to write down everything as we go along. And if we're listening to it while we're walking, like I used to do, I'd stop, I'd take a screenshot, I'd try to make a note. And that's kind of pointless. But why do we engage in this pointless exercise? And the reason for this is just because of school. When we went through school, we had to study, we had to cram, we had to keep all that information in our head, and then we had to write it in an exam, and then we forgot about it. But that system that we have to remember things, that stayed ingrained in our heads, and to this day, what we do is we make notes and we try to remember, and that becomes information overwhelm. You can't remember everything. In fact, the brain is nature's finest spam filter, if you want to call it that. Because what it does is it only helps you remember the things that you need to remember, and then it gets rid of everything else. And when you look at a book, you see 10 chapters, 12 chapters. And when you look at a course, again, 12 chapters. All of this stuff is just inundating you with more and more information. When you enter that book, you're kind of learning something new. So it's kind of double trouble because you don't know the stuff, there is so much stuff, and now you're trying to remember it all. And even while you're trying to remember all of that stuff, you're buying new stuff. You can make a sacred pact with yourself that you're never going to buy anything else. But that doesn't work because then you feel that you're always falling behind. So there is this conundrum. There is this situation which you can't get out of. But there is a way out, and that is called stop when you've had enough and then implement it. About 3 years ago, Renuka and I started reading a book. Sometimes we read the same book together. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. And we got to the end of the first chapter. It was a book about onboarding and how you get people into a business, into a company, but also into a membership site. And we have a membership site at 5000 BC. But we also have courses like the article writing course and all of these other courses that you've heard about on this podcast. Now, the problem with most people entering a new space is that they don't feel safe. They don't know anybody. All the information is brand new. Plus, they're not just listening to us. They've got whole loads of email. They've got other books. All of this stuff is getting at them at the same time. To get them comfortable when they join 5000 BC or when they're doing a course, we take them through what is like a milestone. So when you're driving down the road, you kind of know where you are, you know what's behind you, what's in front of you. And that's kind of what we learned from the book, that we needed to create some sort of milestone. So when Renuka sends out the emails, she tells them, okay, this is step 1, go do this step and only this step. And it's a very tiny step. And then, of course, they do step 1, step 2, step 3. But at step 3, you can see step 1 and step 2. At step 4, you can see step 1, step 2, step 3, and you're on step 4. But you can also see step 7. And that's the beauty of it. It's like a milestone. You know what's behind you and what's in front of you. What has this done for the members or people who are doing the course? Let's say they had to get some notes, or they had to download some audio, or they had to introduce themselves. Usually all of this comes together. Because it's all separated, because you know exactly where you are, they realize when they've missed a step, or they realize when they're on the step, but they also realize what's in front. Essentially, this is the coolest form of onboarding, where people know exactly where they are, have to do a tiny little thing, and they feel safe. We didn't read the rest of the book. And that's because, like a lot of books today, the first chapter is everything, and then it's just a repetitive form of the same thing. There are these one-word books, and all they do is they tell you everything in the first chapter, and then there's nothing else. The first chapter was good. We don't need the overwhelm. And this is the kind of thing that you're looking for. When you're dealing with information overwhelm, you have to remember you have not read all the books on your shelf. You have not read books in your public library. There is information, and has always been loads of information. It's just that you're getting this information at high speed now on your iPad, on your computer, on your tablet, whatever. You're getting it at high speed. And yes, there's more information than there used to be, but it's still way more than you could handle in 1950, 1960, 1970. You can go back quite a few decades and you'll never be able to catch up with the volume of information. Information overwhelm is not new. It's just the speed at which we can access it today. And so if we can access it today, we can also implement it just as quickly. Or slowly, as the case may be. It took us between 6 months to a year to go through all of the courses, to go through all of 5000 BC, and then work out which emails had to be sent out, what sequence they had to be sent out. And that's the kind of thing that makes a huge difference. It doesn't seem like something amazing. It doesn't seem like it's going to increase your customers by 200% or your income or anything of that sort. But customers that are safe and comfortable and achieve stuff, they stay for longer, and then you don't have to go out and do all this massive advertising and crazy marketing that everybody else seems to do. The point is that you don't have to do a heck of a lot of things to improve your life. You don't have to do a lot to improve your business. What you have to do is you have to stop. Stop when you read something that's interesting. Stop when you listen to something or watch something that you think, hey, I could put that into practice. and then go about starting a project on that. Doesn't mean that you're not reading other books. At any given point in time, I'm probably reading 5 or 6 different books, listening to different podcasts, watching videos. I'm on Apple, on Netflix, on CuriosityStream, and I think I just signed up for some Frames magazine in photography. So there's lots of stuff with hobbies, and there's work, and the information is going to keep coming. But all you're really doing is stop, implement, move on. Stop, implement, move on. And you don't have to feel this need to finish off everything. Which is to say that if you read just one chapter from all of the information that you have, you'd still be much better off because you would have implemented these tiny little bits, and therefore you'd be far ahead than most other people who were just wondering, why haven't I finished this book, and what's wrong with me, and why can't I remember everything? So that brings us to the end of the first part, which is that we're never going to catch up. We're never going to remember everything. So the only thing that we can do is stop and implement. And this takes us to the second part, which is probably even more intimidating than the first one, because it doesn't just involve reading a book or watching a video and remembering stuff, but it involves how to start up your business. A lot of people are at that stage where they want to start up something, and then there's social media, and there's social media, and there's more social media, and they don't know what to do. You have to set up a website. You have to start up a podcast. What am I supposed to do? Well, let's find out. One of the most ridiculous questions that I hear people asking my nieces is, what do you want to be when you grow up? So one of my nieces is 12 and the other is 17. And none of us knew the answer to this question. I think it's a totally ridiculous question. And the reality is that most of us studied for one thing and then ended up doing something quite different. To avoid dealing with this stupid question, I've told them, just answer in one word. Say, taller. When they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? You say, taller. Similarly, when we're dealing with all of this social media, all of this stuff when we're starting up a business, we have the same problem as someone who has been in the business for 10 years or 15 years. You think about it for a second, and maybe someone has an email list, and then podcasts come along, and then YouTube comes along, and then Instagram comes along, and then this whole barrage of stuff. And they too have to make decisions just like you do, except you have to make a decision with all of the stuff and your fledgling business. And so you start to ask yourself, what am I going to do? How am I going to go about it? And the answer is, go back to 1990. Now, maybe you were extremely young in 1990, or maybe not. But the point is, in 1990, there was no internet the way we know it. And when you look at it that way, the only thing you could do in business was to get a client. You didn't have to write articles. You didn't have to be on social media. You didn't have to do anything. The only benchmark was get one client. And it's not clients, it's client. One single client. And if you got that one client, then immediately you got a level of confidence. You got paid something. Maybe it was a free gig. I did a lot of free ones. But you got confidence, and then over time you got paid. And then that client referred you on, or you took that testimonial from that client and went to another client. Essentially, what you're doing is you're always looking at, how can I get one client? So if we look at it as having 2 feet, which most of us do, then one foot is in 1990 and the other foot is in 2021. And with that one foot in 1990, the only goal is, how can I get one client, and ideally a paying client? What happens to the other foot? The other foot is in 2021. You choose, where do you want that foot? Do you want it on YouTube? Do you want it on Instagram? Do you want it some other place? But you don't have many feet. You just have 2 feet. One in 1990 and the other in 2021. And that 2021 can only do one step at a time. So you choose where you want that to be. However, we know that we can hop on one foot. So even if you're just on one foot in 1990 for the next 3 years or 5 years, you're still going to do extremely well. Because that's the philosophy, that's the method that has existed for thousands of years. Social media, advertising, all of that stuff, it has existed in bits and pieces and increased over the years. But the one client thing, the 1990 thing, is the same thing that was in 1870, is the same thing that was in 5000 BC. Nothing has changed on that front. So when you say, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do on social media, I don't know what to do on this place or that place, well, that's the other foot. If you just stay on one foot and hop around the place like that, just like I'm doing right now, and shaking everything in the room, that alone will get you one step ahead and the next step ahead and a third step ahead. So when you think of overwhelm in terms of a business, the thing that's scaring you is trying to do all of that stuff, which is impossible, and you know it's impossible. But just use this 2 feet system, or even hop around for a while. Get just one client. Focus on one client. Forget 1,000 fans. Forget that email list. Forget doubling, trebling, doing all of that stuff. Just focus on a single client. How can you get that first client? And then from there, the second client, and the third client, and the fourth client. And that removes so much of the overwhelm. When I first got to Auckland, I was a cartoonist, and then I moved into marketing. And it was like completely intimidating because I didn't know that anyone would hire me. But what I did was I got one client. And this was a sofa store. It was called Sofa Spot. It doesn't exist anymore. And I could consult with them, and they would pay me. And as a result of that, I got a software company called Quicken. And then after that, some lower company. And it went from there, a bread company, one client at a time. And it worked back then in early 2000, and it will work right now. And that brings us to the end of the second part. In the first part, we looked at this burgeoning amount of information that keeps hitting us and how we need to just get to a point where we can stop, and implement. And then we can read as many books or any courses as we need. The second thing is we just get one client and hop around for a while, and that's good enough. Which takes us to the third thing, which is that we have no time. So there's always this concept that we are overwhelmed with time. How do we deal with that? If you've ever tried recording a podcast or making a video, something strikes you right away. And that is that 20 minutes of content takes about 8 hours to produce. 8 hours for 20 minutes? Which is about how much time it takes me to create this podcast, which is about 15 to 30 minutes long, depending on the episode. And the one thing that you learn about 8 hours of work is that it's unsustainable. When we started this podcast in 2014, I didn't have time. Just like most of us, we didn't have any extra time. And certainly not 3 hours or 4 hours, let alone 8 hours. So what happened? For the first year, I just suffered. I would grumble about it all the time. Not on the podcast, just to my wife, Renuka, when we were walking. It was so difficult. She wasn't helping me, blah, blah, blah. It was all of this kind of, quote, self-pity. Well, anyway, that went on for a whole year. I struggled through the whole year. I probably went through the second year somewhat the same way, and then suddenly something happened. Instead of spending 8 hours, I was spending probably 6 hours. And then it became 5 hours. And then after that, we started sending out the music to be done outside, and it came down to a little over 2.5 hours. Most podcasts have scripting, editing, then there's the recording, the uploading, the labeling. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do. And all of that takes now a fraction of the time. So when we look at overwhelm, we're always looking at, well, it takes me 8 hours and that other thing takes me 8 hours and this takes, and I have no time. But notice what happened. An 8-hour task is now being done in under 3 hours, which means that you have 5 hours to waste. To not spend, but to waste. You can do anything. You can sleep in those 5 hours. You can read in those 5 hours. You can play video games. You can do anything. Which is to say that when people tell you that you should double your income or double your clients, they're giving you essentially the wrong advice. What you should be able to do for a long time is pay the bills. Let's say you need to pay the bills and they're around $5,000 a month, and you get client work with $5,000 a month. Well, how can you reduce the amount of time you take to do that client work? That's the only thing that you have to consider. Hence, if all your activities in the week take 5 days to complete, then how can you get it down to 4.5 days? And then how can you get it down to 4.25 days? And then how can you get it down to 4 days? And the moment you get it down to 4 days, now you've saved 1/5 of your time. You're still earning the same amount. You're still dealing with the same client. You're still doing approximately the same activity with the same quality. Nothing has changed. The quality hasn't changed. The activity hasn't changed. How much you're getting paid hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is the time. You now have 1/5 extra time to waste. What you do with it is totally your call. But it's a good thing to have time to waste, just absolute downtime. And then you will get down to 3 days, and then there will be a finite limit. I mean, I can't do this podcast in half an hour. It still takes approximately 2.5 hours, 3 hours. But buying into that idea that you're going to double everything, double your income, double your clients, that's not it. What you have to do is you have to reduce the amount of time that you take to do whatever it is you do in the week. And you have to whittle it away. As I said, in 2014, it took me 8 hours. In 2015, it probably took me 8 hours, maybe 7.5 hours. But then suddenly something changed, and it was taking me a fraction of the time to do the same task. And just yesterday, I recorded one podcast. Today, another podcast. I wrote 4 articles. And no, I'm not trying to impress you in any way. What I'm trying to say to you is that when you reduce the amount of time, you get much better at doing the same task. And so the overwhelm goes away because you have time to spare. You have downtime. So the only thing you have to ask yourself is, how can I do this task in less time? And if you can do that, then, well, there's no more overwhelm, is there? And that brings us to the end of this podcast. We covered 3 things. The first was the amount of information that comes at us. That information hasn't changed. So all we have to do is read a book, get a course, get to a point where you go, this is cool. I'm going to implement it, or I'm going to file this away and use it in my article. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to take some action. And then if you don't read the rest of the book, don't do the rest of the course, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Why? Because you've already got your return on investment. You buy a guitar course, you can play 3 chords, great. You don't have to play 17 chords. 3 chords, you're done. Then later on, if you want, you can go on to play 17 chords. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, where do you start off if you wanted to start a business? Well, you have to have one foot in 1990, and you have to hop along on that one foot for a while. So when you do that, you get a client. You always look for getting one client, and then that leads to 2 and 3 and 4. And the other one, if you have some time, keep that other foot in 2021, and you can do whatever one social media thing that you're doing and see how that works. And then you're not dependent on whatever social media or whatever stuff you have to do. You are dependent on that one foot, and you can hop along pretty much for a very long time. And finally, the biggest gift that you can give yourself is having time to waste. Whatever task you're doing, whether you're writing an article, whether you're learning how to write a sales page, whether you're learning how to play the guitar, whatever it is, how can you shorten that by 20% or 5% or 3%, but you're always whittling away. And when you whittle that away, eventually you get to the point where you can do that very quickly, very easily. And of course, you're even doing it better. So that brings us to the end of this podcast where we looked at overwhelm. And what's the one thing that you can do today? Well, the one thing that you can do today is to reduce the amount of time you take to do the same task, just the very same task. Try that and let me know how you go. And now it's time to find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. One of the things that has been very interesting has been the sales page course. So we've done the sales page course in Houston, we've done it in Brussels and New Zealand and also Munich, I think. Anyway, we've done it in 3 or 4 places around the world, and they were all offline. And this is the first time that we did it online. And it was such a different experience to have to do it online, simply because the whole environment changes. In a live workshop, you're away from all the mundane stuff, all the bills, all the stuff that you have to do at home, all the putting out the garbage, and you're just in this space. And you're in a group, and you're having fun. And it's totally different from working online, where you're doing your assignments every day, and then submitting them, and then having me look over them, or your group look over them, which in turn is completely different from doing a home study by yourself, and having to motivate yourself. And all of these 3 kind of scenarios, they all have to coexist. We would like to have either online, or we would like to have offline, or we would like to have home study, but they don't just sit there by themselves. We have to have all 3 of them going because it's convenient at sometimes to do one or the other. And that's why sometimes we do a course online, like we're doing with the sales page, but also the home study versions. And the home study versions are designed to make it feel as close to the live course with assignments, with very tiny increments so that you can learn it and you can implement it, because the courses don't come around at that pace. And the workshops now have been postponed forever. And we have 2 home studies coming up, one on the 28th of July and one on the 28th of September. The first one, which is on the 28th of July, is the Info Products course. And now you have to be on the waiting list. So you have to go to Psychotactics and then go to Products, and then you have to go to Home Study, and that's where you find the waiting list. But you also get goodies, so you can learn how we go about it. We don't give you information. I know it's an Information Products course, but that's the whole point. You don't give information. You actually show people how to consume your product with tiny increments, and therefore they get to the end. When they get to the end, they then come back and buy more product. So yes, it's called the Information Products course, but really it's a course on consumption, how to create that consumption so that people eat whatever is on their plate and they come back for the second meal. That's on the 28th of September. Go and get your goodies. Go to Psychotactics, go to all of those buttons, and eventually you'll get there in the home study section. I'll say bye for now, and I hope when people ask you, what are you going to be when you grow up, you just say, Tola. Bye-bye.